Okay, we can begin.
All right, we'll call this meeting back to order of the Board of Directors of the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Vice Chair Aquino,
Here.
Director Middleton,
Here.
Dr. Desmond, Director Frost, Dr. Guerra, Dr. Hume, Chair Kennedy,
Here.
Director Laloe. Director Laloe, I think you're muted. Director Maple,
Here.
Director Vandenberg, Director Cerna,
Here.
Director Singh Allen,
Here.
Director Terry,
Here.
Director Vang, we lost quorum. Director Vang, are you on the line? I think you're muted if you are.
Is this the AQMD hazing process?
Director Vandenberg just sent his thumbs up. So let me go back.
Yeah, this is Jamil Moons. I sent him a message. He was asking, he says he's not feeling well on the chat, and I wanted to let him know that after consent calendar that there are no vote, and he did respond positively, affirmatively. So
We have quorum now.
if that counts as he's present or he's still active on the site. Looks like he's unmuted now. Selena, why don't you try again?
Director Vandenberg?
Maybe having audio problems as well.
I think he is. So I have in the chat that he gives a thumbs up that he serves. So we have quorum.
Okay.
I'm here. Great, thank you.
Is that the end of roll call?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Will those that can, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, you have announcements?
Yes. In compliance with directives of the State and Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the physical location of this meeting is closed to the public, consistent with state and local officials' recommendations to promote social distancing and Assembly Bill 361. Members of the public are encouraged to participate in the meeting by observing the meeting in real time at metro14live.saccounty.gov, Zoom video conference line, and by submitting written comments electronically by email at boardclerk@airquality.org. Comments submitted in person will be delivered to the Board of Directors by staff. Public comments regarding matters under the jurisdiction of the Board of Directors will be acknowledged by the chairperson and accepted until the adjournment of the meeting, distributed to the Board of Directors, and included in the record. This meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District is cablecast live without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse cable systems. This meeting is being closed captioned and will be webcast at metro14live.saccounty.gov. Today's meeting will be repeated on Saturday, February 25th, 2023 at 1 p.m. on Channel 14.
Thank you, and that takes us to our consent calendar.
The consent calendar, we have items 1 through 4.
Okay, are there any members of the board that would like to comment or have questions or have an item removed from consent?
Move consent.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second. Aquino.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment, Madam Clerk?
No, Chair, there is not.
Please call the roll.
Vice Chair Aquino,
Aye.
Director Middleton,
Aye.
Director Desmond, Director Frost, Director Guerra, Director Hume, Chair Kennedy,
Aye.
Director Laloe. Director Laloe, can you just look up and give me a thumbs up if you are having audio difficulties? Director Maple,
Aye.
Director Vandenberg? Director Vandenberg sent me a yes through the chat. Director Cerna?
Aye.
Director Singh Allen?
Aye.
Director Terry?
Aye.
Director Vang? Director Vang, can you send me a message to the chat if you're able to? Consent calendar passes.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 5, the Air Pollution Control Officer presentation. Dr. Ayala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Good morning, board members.
1 second. Okay.
Next slide, please. Thank you, board chair. And I have just a couple of very brief items to share with you all. And perhaps the technical difficulties we are facing this morning are an omen, because let me remind you that today is the last meeting that we'll be able to come together for your board of directors meetings in the current format. As you know, the executive order is going to end next week on the 28th. And it's fitting that one of the things that we are working on, per your direction, is some recommendations in terms of how to return back to the traditional Brown Act requirements. And we are going to fold into this recommendation some of the work that we have shared with you in the past related to the air quality benefits of teleworking, teleconferencing, and frankly, just not having to drive around to meet in person as we used to do before the pandemic. We've all grown used to the technology. Now we know most of the time it works, notwithstanding today. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is providing some recommendations and easy to follow directions to our sister agencies, primarily public entities that are subject to the Brown Act. And to our surprise, there's quite a bit of interest in this. There's still quite a bit of confusion, if you will, in terms of what this means. And the letter, the correspondence we're working on is actually going to be pretty far-reaching, because we want to reach to regional agencies. Obviously, we are going to be reaching to state agencies. So I think at the running list, we have probably north of 100 recipients that we want to reach out with this recommendation. But in summary, we are going to come up with alternate locations for you all to convene in our board meetings. Those alternate locations need to be accessible to the public, and they need to be noticed. So what is going to happen is the board clerk is going to be reaching out to each one of you individually prior to our next meeting. And then we will be working with you to decide where would you like to take the board meeting from. And again, continuing to encourage folks like Director Vandenberg, who's already spoken about his inability to come to downtown very easily. You will not be able, most likely, to stay in your home office, because again, this needs to be publicly accessible. But the option we're going to recommend to each one of you is that you go to your office at City Hall or some other place where it's okay and safe to notice as a public venue. So again, given the importance and the relevance of the information, we're going to put this in a document that we can share widely. So we're just giving you a preview, and we'll be sharing that with you all. And interestingly, our timing is perfect. The emergency declaration ends on the 28th, and that is the date that we are shooting to send this letter out. So I'll answer any questions you have after the APCO report, but we just wanted to make you aware that we are, per your direction, working on that information. Next slide, please.
Mr. Chair. Dr. Ayala, I had a question about what I think I heard you say about board direction to explore the prospect of holding meetings in different locations in person, I suspect, right? So you're talking about having in-person meetings rotate or,
No, Director Cerna. So what we are recommending is to return to traditional Brown Act requirements. And what that means is alternate locations are okay to have. So you don't all have to be physically in the same location.
Okay.
We can have multiple locations. Suffice that we meet two criteria, that those are publicly accessible and that they are noticed as locations for your board meetings 72 hours in advance.
okay, that clarifies it. I wasn't sure if you were speaking to the possibility of having in-person meetings rotate at different locations. And if that was the case, then the other limiting parameter, of course, I believe is there the infrastructure to broadcast, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so we're not recommending that. And the only in-person convenings that we are going to recommend to the board is that we consider coming together at least twice a year, as we discussed last time. But like I said, the clerk is going to be reaching out to each one of you because, again, we have to note the location and we have to notice it. So we can address your questions at that point. And again, we're going to put this information along with the arguments for why this is good for air quality in this correspondence that we're working on. So next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. We're already there. The last item that I want to share with you all is again, just to give you a heads up, because obviously locomotives in our region are pretty visible from the standpoint of, obviously, we have a lot of locomotive activity. We have the museum, what have you. But we've been made aware of an issue, and the issue is simply idling locomotives that idle for what we think is presumably too long. We're talking, in some cases, days without uninterrupted idling activity. Clearly, the concern is public health. Diesel emissions are a known carcinogen. It happens that some of the complaints that we've received in the Sacramento area for these idling activities are right next to people, residences, and so forth. So this is something that we are going to be looking into. And again, the point of us bringing this to your attention is that you are aware of it. We're already talking to UP, and we're in communication, exchanging information. We're not the only air district that is dealing with these issues, unfortunately. But I did want to make you aware, because I know we've had some inquiries from elected officials in the region that are interested. So we thought we'd make you aware of this as well. So more to come. But with this, this concludes the APCO report, Chair. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
Director Maple has her hand raised.
Director Maple.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that. I do want to say that I have several communities in my district that are impacted by this specific problem, and we've been reached out to by several constituents with these concerns. So I'd love to work closely with you on this if possible. I would also recommend, in addition to reaching out to UP, that we reach out to the union that represents the locomotive engineers. They're pretty active, and they might have some feedback as well. So happy to connect you.
Yeah, thank you, Director Maple. We'd be happy to connect with you as well. And again, thank you for sharing that. Part of the reason we wanted to bring this to your attention is, again, because I know your constituents, for some of you, are reaching out to you. So, you know, we are working on it. We're on it. We'll keep you updated.
Any other questions or comments?
Not at this time.
Do we have any comments from the public?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Director Ayala, I will say thank you to you and your staff for taking leadership on the Brown Act guidance for teleconferencing. You are accurate, and there's confusion. Of all the boards we all sit on, I have heard multiple interpretations of it. So I think it's appropriate that, and you and I have been talking about this for years, that the AQMD take the lead, and hopefully we can get a unified position and policy throughout the region. So thank you for that. Next item, please.
The next item on the agenda, the discussion calendar, item number 6, 2022 heat event and emission impacts in Sacramento, and I have Brian Krebs on the line to give a presentation.
Hopefully my audio is working.
We can hear you.
We can
Okay,
hear you.
thanks.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, Chair Kennedy, members of the board. My name is Brian Krebs, and I'm the permitting program manager here at the district, and I would like to give you an informational presentation regarding the heat event in 2022 and the resulting emissions impacts. I also want to point out that the presentation that I'm about to give has some slight changes on slide 3 from that which is part of the originally sent agenda packet. Next slide, please. To start with a little background, at the end of last summer, specifically August 31st through September 9th, California and the adjacent western states went through an unprecedented heat wave. This resulted in a record use of electricity and caused a Cal ISO grid emergency. Though I will be talking about the heat event of 2022, we experienced similar events in 2021, with climate change making these events more and more common. Next slide, please. In anticipation of the 22 heat event, the governor declared an energy emergency and issued an emergency proclamation. In order to keep the lights on, the proclamation allowed the power plants and backup generators to operate outside of their permit requirements. Now, the governor's proclamation only has the authority to grant relief from the state requirements, and that separate federal action would be needed for relief of any additional federal requirements. More on that in a subsequent slide. Next slide, please. As was mentioned, since these heat events are more common, resulting in potential energy shortfalls, several state incentive programs have been developed to try and help alleviate these situations. The incentive programs allow participating companies to either provide energy to the grid or reduce these companies' energy use during these emergencies. One program is known as the Energy Load Response Program, or ELRP. The ELRP is as the name implies, is an energy reduction program that was created by the California Public Utilities Commission and is administered by the state's 3 large investor-owned utilities, PG&E, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. The second program, which pertains to Sacramento, is the Demand Side Grid Support Program, or DSGS. This program offers incentives to electric customers that provide either load reduction or backup generation. This program is operated by the California Energy Commission with a $2 million annual fund. We are aware of one Sacramento company that participated last year, and that company is the NTT Global Data Center. Next slide, please. The NTT Global Data Center is a data center comprised of 3 separate facilities that are in close proximity to one another. 2 of the facilities are adjacent to one another, while the third is located approximately a half-mile away. The 2 adjacent facilities are classified as a federal Title V source. In total, these 3 facilities have 53 large diesel-fired emergency backup generators, 28 of which operated during the 22 event. These 28 backup engine generators are rated at over 83,000 total horsepower and have 57 megawatts of energy generating capacity. As mentioned earlier, the governor's proclamation only granted relief from the state requirements. Therefore, the federal Title V source needed to additionally obtain an emergency order from the Department of Energy in order to grant them relief from their federal permit requirements. Slide 5, or next slide, please. Of these 57 engines, as previously mentioned, 28 engines were operated for 4 days of the heat event, September 6th through the 9th, during the peak energy demand time. So they didn't operate the entire day, but during the peak time. These engines operated for a total of 561 hours, or an approximate average of about 20 hours per engine. The chart to the right illustrates the scale of the emissions. During the 4-day period illustrated by the bar to the left, these engines emitted a worst case estimate of 7.3 tons of NOx. The middle bar illustrates the amount of emissions, 3.1 tons per year this company emitted in all of 2021. Lastly, the bar to the right illustrates the average daily emissions of 6.4 tons per summer day for all stationary sources in the whole Sacramento federal non-attainment area. Though these three columns represent different periods of time, nonetheless, you can see how significant these excess emissions were for a very short period of time. Next slide, please. This is a map of the county showing the relative location of the NTT facility, which is located northwest of several sensitive communities. The excess emissions from these events are potential contributors to ozone production on the hottest days of the year. Along with the potential of ozone increases, health risks are also increased from the excess diesel emissions, which are considered toxic air contaminants. Next slide, please. The original governor's proclamation back in 2021 directed the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, to develop a program to mitigate any resulting emissions from these events. As a result, CARB created the Climate Heat Impact Response Program, or CHIRP. There are two components in CHIRP: emissions reporting and the mitigation plan. The mitigation plan has a strong focus on ensuring investments take place in the impacted and disadvantaged communities where the emission sources are located. Though the program spanned both the 2022 and 2021 heat events, to date, CARB has not provided any mitigation funding. Next slide, please. As for next steps, we will continue to work with NTT to further refine their excess emission calculations. As mentioned, they're currently based on worst cases if all engines operated at full capacity. We are also working with CARB CHIRP team on the mitigation process in hopes of ensuring that the mitigation is tied to the affected communities. In conclusion, as you can see from Sacramento's experience last year, keeping the lights on does come at the expense of air quality. The district is in full support of the public safety aspects of keeping the lights on. However, since these types of events are anticipated to continue on into the foreseeable future, we are advocating and working with the state, air districts, and other energy partners for cleaner and better alternatives than the use of diesel backup generators when confronted with these types of heat emergencies in the future. Next slide. This concludes the presentation, and I will be happy to entertain any questions.
Are there any questions from the board? Okay, do we have any public comment?
No, Chair, we do not.
Thank you. This was a receive and file, so next item, please.
The next item, item number 7, update on Clean Air Act fee requirements, and I have Kevin Williams in chambers, excuse me, to give a presentation.
Okay, good morning, members of the board. My name is Kevin Williams. I'll wait for the presentation to pop up. My name is Kevin Williams. I supervise the rulemaking group at the district. I'm here to give a presentation on a rule that we'll be taking next month for a hearing before the board. It involves penalty fees imposed by the Clean Air Act on major sources in the event that we should not achieve air quality standards. Next. Federal EPA frequently reviews and adopts new air quality standards and evaluates whether particular regions are in attainment for those standards based on monitoring data. Regions that are designated as non-attainment areas then are classified according to the severity of the problem. And those classifications can range from marginal to extreme. And as you move forward in this range of classification, you end up getting more time to attain. But those classifications come with additional restrictions as you move forward. Next slide. So the Federal Clean Air Act, it's Section 185, it requires a penalty on major sources if EPA issues a finding of failure to attain an ozone standard by the applicable deadline for that standard. Sacramento County is part of the Sacramento Metro non-attainment area, and that area is classified as a severe non-attainment area for the 1997, 2008, and the 2015 ozone standards. Currently, the district's Rule 307 only applies to the 1979 one-hour ozone standard. Next. So the Clean Air Act penalty fees are triggered by a finding of failure to achieve the standard. And on January 17th, last month, EPA issued a finding of failure to submit a penalty fee rule for the 2008 standard. And that's then a deficiency in the plan to meet that standard. And that finding starts a clock. It became effective on February 16th that would require increased emission offsets for businesses and federal highway fund sanctions if we don't correct that by submitting a penalty fee rule with an update that includes the 2008 standard. And we'll also need to have implementation of the fees for the 2015 standard also, even though we haven't been flagged as a deficiency for that, but we'd like to get that in the rule. And so we've proposed in the amendments that we're going to bring to expand the applicability of the rule to include the 1997, the 2008, the 2015, and future ozone standards. And then upon district approval, we plan to submit Rule 307 to the board. After board adoption, we plan to submit it to Carbon EPA to stop the sanction clocks. Next. This map shows the locations of major sources to which these penalties would apply. On the right is a list of the major sources. We have Chevron, the terminal, Kiefer Landfill, Mitsubishi Rayon, NTT Global is the data center that Brian Krebs was just talking about. Procter & Gamble Manufacturing. We have another terminal run by Santa Fe Pacific Pipeline. Silgan Can Company is another one. We have 4 plants, power plants that are operated by SMUD. And lastly, the UC Davis Medical Center. And the map, which is a little bit difficult to see, shows the locations of those facilities within the county, with a number on them that corresponds to the legend on the right. Next. So now I'd like to cover what's been done so far on public outreach and the next steps. So we held a public workshop on February 9th. And prior to that, we had sent out a workshop notice. It was widely broadcast to everybody on our list who requests public notices. We sent personally addressed email address to each of those 12 major sources, and then followed up with phone calls. And we were able to talk to the right people about that. We held Teams meetings in some cases to describe the purpose of the rule and the impact that it could have on their facilities, and the requirements that we were under to adopt the rule. and gave them the opportunity to ask questions and also to encourage them to participate in that February 9th workshop. As a next step, these proposed amendments to Rule 307 are going to be brought before the board at the March 23rd meeting for a public hearing. And then, assuming that is adopted, we'll submit them to Carbon EPA as SIP submissions. And that concludes my presentation. I'll answer any questions anyone has.
Any questions from the board? Director Maple.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. So you said, you had done some outreach to the affected organizations, and then you had the meeting on the 9th. Did everyone participate in that meeting who is affected, or were there organizations or people that didn't participate that probably should have been there?
I don't think we had anybody who shouldn't have been there. Not all organizations were represented, but all organizations had been briefed prior to the meeting, and I think that some of them may have felt that they didn't need to participate in the public workshop, that they had that their briefings had sufficed.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Is there any public comment?
No, Chair, there's not.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Do I hear? Oh. Next item is closed session, and members who are present, or a member who is present, we will move to the hearing room. And for those of you that are on Zoom, the clerk will move you into closed session. So you don't need to do anything.
Just give me 1 second and I'll send you all over.
Mm-hmm.
Amy.
All right, we'll call back to order this February 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District. At this time, Council, is there anything to report out of closed session?
No, there's nothing to report. It was just a status report to the board.
Thank you very much. With that, thank you all for joining us. We are adjourned.
Before we adjourn, we have to ask if there's any board ideas, comments, or AB 1234 reports.
Are there any board comments or AB 1234 reports?
Nope.
We will again adjourn.
Thank you.